I was really hoping for a bonus tonight, but honestly doubted it. I put on my dark blue tuxedo that I hadn't worn in 3 years. I have to admit, I looked damn good if I do say so myself, but I really didn't like dressing up like that. After all, today was Friday, and I was supposed to be sitting in my favorite rocking chair, enjoying a quality single malt whiskey. Instead, I sat around a table with coworkers and their spouses at a benefit dinner and danced for blessings in a backpack. It was one of the biggest social events of the year in our small Midwestern town, and virtually every important person from the region was present. My boss made a reservation for this event, and both my wife and I were expected to be there. In fact, I specifically told my wife to buy a new, sexy dress for the evening, and she did not disappoint. To be honest, she may have gone a little overboard with her sexuality. Oh fuck, baby. I was talking sexy, not one step away from death, I remarked as she came downstairs after changing. At 35, my wife was at the peak of her beauty, as it seemed to me. Her thick red hair was styled high on her head, and she wore long gold earrings to highlight her long neck. The low-scoop neckline of the silky burgundy dress revealed an acre of her ample breasts, and the hem, which ended mid-thigh, showed off all the time she spent in the gym working out her legs. I expected her to get a dress, but this dress was definitely a statement of, "Hey, look at me." Of course, I looked and knew that any other man would also like this view. I never minded other men looking at my wife as long as she remembered that I didn't share my toys. I told her this too often. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. While I would have preferred to sit at home in my chair, Esther was exactly where she wanted to be, mixing with the cream of our city's society. As a high school teacher, she didn't have the opportunity to go out much, but she was one of those natural social butterflies. She was well-read and witty and attracted people to her like ants to a picnic. We chatted a bit and hit the dance floor a couple of times before I went to the bar and Esther returned to the table. When I got within a few feet of our seats, I saw Hess talking animatedly to the man sitting in my place. It was us Senator Thomas Norberto, who looked like the Latino Tom Selleck during Selleck's Magnum Pie days. He was incredibly handsome, single and 6'4", pound 220. Some considered him a candidate for the next presidential race more for his looks than his intelligence. I stood a few feet away from them for a couple of seconds, expecting my wife to at least notice my presence, but she didn't. In fact, I had never seen my wife look so engaged before, practically making moon eyes at the senator during their conversation. Since none of them were going to acknowledge me, I did it myself. "Sorry, Senator, but this is my seat," I said as I reached my seat with 2 drinks in hand. He completely ignored me again and continued talking to my wife, whose face was lighting up. I waited silently for another 5 seconds before I stopped being Mr. Polite. I passed my hand holding the glass between their faces, breaking their spell, and placed her glass on the table in front of her. I stayed right between them, holding my drink, before the honorable senator got the hint. I have to go. I have to find my place at the head table. But I'll be back later to continue this conversation, he told my wife, basically ignoring me the entire time. "Stupid bastard," I grumbled to Hess, sitting back down after he left. "I find him charming," she replied. "On the other hand, you were downright rude to a yes senator, for God's sake. You seem to have forgotten that you are my wife, not his, and he sat in my seat and wouldn't leave. This is incredibly rude and cocky, even if he thinks he's going to be the next president." She made that arrogant look that some women do very skillfully. I hated it and told my wife this many times during our 9 years of marriage. I looked at her sternly, not wanting to get into an argument in front of everyone. She snorted, but remained silent. Dinner took about 90 minutes before the band started playing again and people returned to the dance floor. I knew Hess loved to dance, so I stood up and extended my hand to her. She looked at my hand, looked me in the eyes, and shook her head decisively. I stomped my foot and walked back to the bar, ordering another drink while standing there and making small talk with the others who were also hanging out there. I lost sight of Hess when she stood up for what I thought was a conversation, but it was easy to keep an eye on the idiot senator. With his guards always nearby, the senator chatted and shook hands for the next half hour before stepping out onto the open veranda. I wasn't born yesterday, so when Hess didn't return to the table after 10 minutes, I decided to check the veranda. There they sat in deep conversation with an elderly couple, with the senator's hand casually resting on my wife's waist. I approached the couple and began to remove the senator's arm before someone grabbed me and twisted my arm between my shoulder blades, causing me to cry out in pain and attracting the attention of those around me. "No one messes with a United States senator, buddy," a voice growled behind me, pushing me toward the exit. "It's my wife he's holding on to," I muttered as I was pushed outside. He pushed me back into the main ballroom before letting me go. I told him to bring my wife to me if he didn't want me to start screaming. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath as he walked towards the senator. 2 minutes later, Hess returned through the door, red with shame. She shrugged, as if she didn't understand what was going on. I grabbed her hand and almost pulled her out of the ballroom. The ride home began in silence, but I knew it wouldn't last long. For some reason, Hess thought the best defense was offense. "How could you? You embarrassed me in front of a United States senator tonight," she screamed at me. Up until this point, I thought Hester and I had a good marriage. Yes, we had our moments like any other couple, but I would bet the lives of my 2 children that we would last until the end. Not anymore. "You must understand that you are my wife," I objected to her. "No one, and I don't care if it's the fucking President of the United States, should hug you like he owns you. You know it's over the line, but you didn't do anything to break out of this hug. You acted like a teenager in love with his high school crush." She blushed and stammered, but eventually lowered her head and didn't answer. I knew I had hit the nail on the head. She was definitely fascinated by this man. If I thought Hess would apologize at some point, she showed me I was wrong. Not only did she not apologize, but she barely spoke to me for the next few days. Even the children, despite being only 7 and 5 years old, felt that something was wrong and tried not to enter the room if we were both nearby. Lunchtime was the only time there was any real conversation between us, as we both seemed to be trying to communicate through the kids. However, on Wednesday night, after the kids went to bed, Hess said we needed to talk. "Can't we talk? Shouldn't we talk? We just need to talk." Nothing good ever follows these 4 words. And in fact, nothing good came from these 4 words. My loving wife informed me that she and the honorable senator would be going on a date on Friday evening. "It's not a date. In fact, I'm accompanying him to one of these charity dinners," Hess said when I asked her about the inappropriateness of a married woman going on a date with a man who is not her husband. "That sounds like a date to me," I explained. "If you accompany him, for may mean that you are his companion, and since you are married." "You are a petty person with a sick mind," she screamed back. "I would never cheat on you." "What do you call a married woman going on a date with another man? Even if you don't have sex, going on a date with another man is cheating," I argued. "Would you let me accompany your hot friend Angie to dinner and dancing?" She twisted her mouth, frowned, and looked at me with narrow eyes. I knew mentioning her hottest friend would get her attention. She had some problems with Angie, who, to quote the Rolling Stones, could make a dead man rise. "This is completely different, and you know it. This would be a date. This would be escorting U.S. Senator," she said. "Oh, that's right. Certainly. Huge difference. Look, Hess, you can't date another man, whatever you want to call it. We're married. We made vows. Remember that rejecting everyone else thing?" I said. "You don't own me, Reggie, even if we're married," she snorted. "If I really want to do something, I'll do it. I'm not your thing." Crap. That's what you get when you marry a crossword lover. You're really not my thing, but you're the mother of my children, and I'd hate for you to destroy our family," I said. Her eyes became wide as saucers. Looks like I got her attention. "You won't be so stupid," she said mockingly. "It's just—" "No, honey, this is a turning point in our marriage." She frowned again, but didn't answer. I never saw this coming. My eyes nearly fell out of my head when Hester came downstairs after dressing for a date on Friday night. She wore a low-cut, strapless white lace dress that hugged her voluptuous body and exposed the top half of her large breasts. I had never seen this dress before and assumed she had bought it especially for the occasion. "Fucking hell," I whispered in admiration. She took my remark as a compliment and made a slow turn. At that moment, our children ran into the room, saw Hess, and stopped in their tracks. "Wow, Mom, you are beautiful," exclaimed our 7-year-old Alice. "Why are you dressed up like a princess?" Hess looked first at our daughter, then at me, apparently expecting me to cover for her. This did not happen. I just looked at my wife. I can't tell her," Hess began. "You can't because you know it's wrong," I snapped. "Explain to your daughter how you're leaving the three of us, your family, to go on a date with a senator." "Mom has to go out for a while to a fancy party," Hess began. "Be a good girl for Daddy, and I'll see you tomorrow morning when you wake up." "Why doesn't Daddy come with you?" 5-year-old Nate suddenly asked. Hess hesitated, trying to come up with a good lie. I didn't need time to come up with the truth. "Because Mom doesn't love me enough," I replied. Both children looked at Hess with shocked, hurt expressions. She looked at me with the same expression. "Really hurts, doesn't it?" I asked. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The four of us froze in place before it rang again. "Moment of truth, dear. Him. Or us," I said. She answered the door on the third ring. I saw one of the senator's guards at the door and noticed a black limousine in the driveway. "Remember, be good for Daddy. See you tomorrow morning." With these words, she left. Looks like it was him. I was shocked for about a minute, then realized that I still have children who need attention. I wish I could drown my sorrows in a cupboard of alcohol, but that won't happen. What will actually happen is a couple of video calls, one for each of my parents and hers. After all, children love communicating with their grandparents on FaceTime. I started with Hester's parents. We've always had a great relationship, and I knew Hess' little adventure wouldn't go down well with them. We laughed and joked with them for about a minute until Mom Hess realized her daughter wasn't on the call. "Where's my daughter, Reggie? Did you put her in a suitcase?" Buy me mother-in-law jokes. No, Mom. Hess went on a date with Senator Thomas Norberto. She'll be back tomorrow, I think," I said quietly. "What?" exclaimed my mother-in-law. "Date? Are you sure, Reg?" "She calls it accompanying a handsome senator to a charity dinner. I call it a date. Maybe something more," I blurted. "And she won't be back until tomorrow?" my perplexed father-in-law shouted. "And you just let her go?" I tried to reason with her dad, but she told me that I didn't own her, I replied. "I told her she's abandoning her family if she does this, but she seems to consider it a forgivable offense." The kids then took over the conversation for the next 5 minutes, for which I was grateful. My mother-in-law then sent the children to their rooms for a few minutes and returned to talking about my wife. "Don't do anything rash or stupid," she advised. "Talk to her, Reg. Don't just leave her. Think about the kids." "What did she do when she walked out the door, Mom?" My mother-in-law didn't have time to answer before I ended the call. My mother, on the other hand, was less restrained when I called my parents and told them what happened. "I know the name of a good lawyer, dear," my mother immediately suggested. She was Aunt Elaine's lawyer in her divorce from Uncle Will. She ate Will's lawyer for breakfast. Yes, that was good to know. I was devastated by the state of my marriage. How could I not notice this side of my wife's character? Hester seemed to think nothing of spending the night with another man and expected me to give her freedom or some sort of temporary break from the marriage without asking. It will not happen. Of course, the senator was a handsome man, well-built, handsome, and with great charisma. But I'm not exactly a chopped stew. I'm 5'11", with a medium build, broad shoulders, small waist, and abs. I have thick dark brown hair cut short. In terms of appearance, I always thought I was a street person and never had a problem dating in high school and college. I started to think too much about what Esther was doing at that particular moment. I realized that I would spend the entire night imagining her cheating on me, unless I managed to divert my thoughts to something else, or I would be blown up. Thinking about my children, I realized that I couldn't tear myself away right away. I need to take care of them. But I needed to be taken care of too. I was juggling many emotions at once: irrevocable loss, emptiness, abandonment, betrayal, and anger. I sent Esther a short message. "You made the worst mistake of your life." I didn't expect an answer. Looking around, the house seemed so empty. I really didn't want to stay at home and think. I wanted to get out and do something distracting, something with my kids. And then I had a wild idea. Several years ago, I bought 4 acres of lakefront land on a newly opened property on Lake Margaret, about 200 miles north of our home. My intention was to build a lakeside cabin on this property for weekends and family vacations. The estate was almost square, with a shoreline of just over 400 feet. A fast-flowing stream flowed along the southern edge of my land. I went to see it a couple of times, but so far I only had preliminary plans for its development. I turned to Eliza and Nate and said, "Let's go hiking." Nate was the first to ask, "Where?" "On the lake where I bought the site for our cabin," I answered. They both jumped up with excitement and said, "You mean tonight?" "Yes," I said, "tonight." But Eliza, my daughter with an organized mind, said, "Is it too late to go? Already the 7th." She continued, "And besides, we don't have any camping gear." I replied, "It's too early. We will go to Ray, buy everything we need, load it into the car and go. It's about a 4-hour drive, but you won't notice it because I'm sure you'll be asleep." I told the kids to bring backpacks, jackets, extra clothes, better outdoor shoes, swimsuits, etc. I also told them to bring some blankets and pillows so they could sleep in the car. It was Eliza who went to the pantry and took some snacks with her for the journey. While this madness was going on, I prepared myself a large thermos of black coffee. I'll need it for a long overnight trip. We went to the sports store, knowing that we had probably forgotten something important. When we arrived at Ray, a nice saleswoman approached us. I told her we were here to buy everything we needed for the trek everything. Luckily, our saleswoman was a longtime camping expert. She hiked the entire length of the Appalachian Trail and the Great Western Trail, a 100-mile journey from Mexico to Canada. She assured us that there was nothing she didn't know about hiking and camping. I ended up buying, among other things, 2 3-second 3-person tents, 3 sleeping bags that can withstand temperatures down to 0 degrees Celsius, air mattresses, a folding table with 4 folding chairs, 3 folding chairs, a 2-cylinder propane stove, camp pots, pans, utensils, as well as 2 rechargeable LED flashlights. I had a Nissan Sport, a tiny SUV, and we had a hard time fitting all our gear in the trunk. I had to put a few things on the front passenger seat. Our saleswoman insisted that we take a large refrigerator with us. We'll need it to keep the food fresh and hide the smell from the bears. She told us to keep it in a locked car overnight. The bears, I thought. Given this possible danger, I decided to return home and pick up my Browning high-power 9mm semi-automatic pistol, which I did. I also prudently threw 4 rolls of toilet paper into the trunk. The last thing I did before leaving home was leave Esther a handwritten note. All that was written there was, "Gone on a hike. I'll be back in 3-4 days." I placed the note on the kitchen table and placed the wedding ring on top. On the way out the door, I grabbed 2 bottles of my best bourbon. Once the excitement of shopping wore off, we all realized we were hungry. On the way out of town, I stopped for gas and stopped at McDonald's, where we bought hamburgers, fries, and chocolate shakes to eat in the car. I also stopped at Safeway, which was open 24 hours a day, and bought milk, coffee, bacon, eggs, frozen French toast, bananas, butter, chocolate trail mix, and a few other items I thought we'd need. Although Alice and Nate talked excitedly about our camping adventure, they soon began to fall asleep. I was left alone with my thoughts that I pushed into the background in preparation for the trip. Hester hurt me. She hurt me so much that I didn't know if I still had love for her. How can someone who claims to love someone be so cruel and disrespectful? I think there is no good way to tell your husband that you are going to sleep with another man. What did she think? Would there be consequences? Is she so deceived that she thinks I will just forgive her for this behavior? She must have known that I would never agree to be a conscious cuckold for the rest of my life. I thought about divorce and what it would mean for me financially. My main thought about the divorce was that I didn't want to be a single dad. I couldn't imagine seeing my kids only every other weekend and a few weeks during the summer. I thought that if she came back full of remorse, sincere remorse, then maybe we would have a chance at reconciliation. Maybe. Then I started having thoughts of revenge. There were many women who would go to bed with me if I asked them. It would show her. This would also make the situation worse, not better. Without coming to any ideas about the consequences, I settled on one criterion. Whatever I did had to be in the best interests of Alice and Nate. I cried quietly while driving. I didn't want to wake my kids. 4 hours later, I was near my site. However, in the darkness, I wasn't entirely sure where I was. My iPhone GPS helped, but there were no roads in the area. I parked in the dark and decided I needed a rest. I didn't have to do this, but I opened one bottle of my bourbon and poured myself 2 shots into a plastic glass. Before I fell asleep, I told myself that next time I would take my hand whiskey glasses. The next thing I remember is my daughter knocking on the window. "Daddy, Daddy, look at the deer." It's morning already. The sun has just risen. My muscles were a little sore due to the uncomfortable car seat I slept in. I opened the door just in time to see 4 or 5 deer disappear into the woods. I told Alice and Nate, "If you are quiet and don't move when you see the deer, you won't spook them. They might eventually become friends with you if they realize you're not a threat to them." I decided in my head that next time I would bring deer salt to the site to attract them when they want to come here. I will also bring carrots for the deer. Before setting up camp, we decided to explore the area. There were more than 300 trees on the ground. It was essentially a virgin forest. We walked along the road to the water, then along the shore to the creek, and finally returned to the car. During our hike, we found a clearing near the center of the property on a small, flat hill overlooking the lake. We chose this place for our camp. That's me dragged all of our gear to our chosen campsite. Most things were still in boxes that we needed to open. The 3-second tents turned out to be a godsend. All you had to do was lay out the tent on the ground and lift up the center handle. The tent immediately unfolded. Likewise, we unpacked our other camping supplies and our camp began to take shape. I found 18 or 20 large rocks that I placed in the center of the camp for a fire pit. I sent the children to collect firewood. The forest was strewn with dry tree branches, and the children brought enough for the entire duration of our stay. I found some large branches that we used to keep the fire going until late at night. Thus began our camping adventure. We all learned a lot about life in such a primitive environment. For example, I needed a flashlight and maybe one of those headlamps. The children reluctantly learned that they would have to pee and poop in the forest. I found a fallen log that could serve as a support and used my army shovel to dig a hole for our waste. I didn't even think about it that while the children and I were setting up camp, Hester had to return home. I left my phone in the car most of the day. When I finally looked at it, I noticed that there was no cell service in this place. We camped, hiked, and even swam in the lake. It was cold. On Sunday afternoon, we drove to the nearby town of Margaritaville. It was a small town that attracted campers and fishermen. We replenished our supplies with food and other things we found we needed, like an axe. While we were in town, I noticed that my cell phone was working again. It was full of text messages, emails, and voicemails from Hester. I didn't want to waste my time reading them, so I didn't. However, I sent her 4 or 5 photos and a short video with no explanation of the kids having fun at their campsite and by the lake. We stayed at Lake Margaret until Tuesday. Tuesday afternoon, we packed everything in the car and drove into town where I found a storage place where we could leave most of our gear instead of carrying it home. The kids insisted that we bring home at least one tent so they could camp in the backyard. Although it was not night on the way back, the children slept almost the entire way, and I had time to think about how I was going to talk to Hester and solve our marriage problems. As much as I wanted to yell at her for her obscenities, I decided that I would never get into a loud, lengthy argument with her. I didn't want the children to witness the verbal battle between us. I decided to take several actions to minimize my time with Hester and maximize my time with Alice and Nate. I sent Hester a text message when we were 2 hours away from home. I told her that we needed dinner and would arrive home around 7 p.m. As we pulled into the driveway, Hester came out to meet us. She was dressed quite simply, shorts and a white blouse. She pulled her hair into a ponytail. She gave me a hostile look, and I responded in kind. The children ran to her with hugs and kisses and immediately began to talk about their adventures in the forest. I stood aside because I didn't want to disturb this intimate moment. And besides, I didn't want to pretend to be affectionate towards Hester. Instead, I started unloading the car and putting things in the garage. Before she disappeared into the house with the children, Hester said, "It looks like you haven't spent the last 4 days explaining to them how evil their mother is." After Hester and the children had gone into the house, and I was unloading the car, Abigail came up to me and, to my surprise, gave me a big, long hug. Abigail was a neighbor who lived a few doors down from us. She was a widow of about 50 years old and an attractive widow. She had an excellent figure and attractive breasts. "It's good to see you too, Abigail. Looks like you missed me more than my wife. Reggie, I wanted to talk to you as soon as you got back. There's something I think you'll want to know," Abigail said, completely serious. I asked her what was on her mind. She said, "At about 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, I was running around the block when I saw a black limousine pull up on the curb in front of your house. Two big thugs got out of the car and blocked the sidewalk, preventing me from passing. As I stood there thinking, who are these people and what do they want? One of the thugs helped Hester out of the car. Then Senator Noberto came out of the limousine. They seemed to pay no attention to me as I continued to run in place. Noberto pulled Hester towards him and kissed him passionately. I heard Hester say something that sounded like 'see you again.' They shared one more full body kiss before Hester headed towards the house. As she passed me, she smiled but didn't say anything. The senator returned to his car and drove away. I can't discuss this with you right now, Abigail, but we have problems in River City," I said, referring to my marriage. "Thank you for this information. It will help me deal with things." Abigail hugged me again, which was nice not only because it comforted a friend, but as I described, Abigail was an attractive woman with a great figure, and it was nice to hold her torso for a moment. "If you need anything that I can help with, let me know. I'm usually here, day and night," she said with a smile. When I finished unloading the camping equipment in the garage, I walked into the house. Hester made us grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. This was probably the perfect dinner for both me and the kids. Hester and I talked about family matters while the kids were around, but we both knew that after they went to bed, we would have to talk seriously. We bathed the children and prepared their clothes for the next day. By 8 in the evening, I had already put them to bed. They were still excited about their adventure and wanted to know when they could do it again. I went to the family room, poured myself 2 shots of bourbon whiskey, and quietly waited for the conflict. When Hester came down, she walked right up to my rocking chair and, putting her hands on her hips, said, "You have a lot to explain." I just smiled in response. "Begin," I replied. I took a sip of bourbon and looked at Hester, waiting for her list of complaints. She gave the impression that I had nothing worthwhile. "What," she began, "does your wedding ring on the kitchen table mean? Was that some melodramatic way of telling me that you didn't want to be married to me anymore while I was on a date with Tom? It occurred to me that you'd have to be pretty close to a U.S. senator to call him Tom." Hester continued, "Well, I'm back home, and you can put your ring back on." With these words, she handed me my wedding ring. I looked at it for a few seconds, sighed, and slowly placed it on the nightstand next to my chair. I don't need this anymore, I said. What else do you have? Reg, this doesn't have to mean the end of our marriage. I know you're hurting, and I'm so sorry that I'm the one who hurt you. However, it was something I felt I needed to do. For myself. I'm not sorry. Tom was a wonderful partner, Bed. I was hoping for an apology for your actions, not because you hurt my feelings. Looks like that won't happen. It was a wonderful experience for me, Hester said with a dreamy look on her face. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I only wish I could have done it without hurting you. But I expect you to get through it because you love me. This was a one-time event and will not affect us in the long term. Perspective. At this point, my future was decided. Until this point, I had hoped to find a truly repentant wife, ashamed and regretful of her actions. If she had shown great remorse for her sexual escapade with the senator, I thought that perhaps we would have had at least a small chance of an eventual reconciliation. But this is clearly not the case. Glass in hand, I waved for Hester to continue. You just had to tell my parents, didn't you? How could you do that? This should have been a private, intra-family matter between you and me. And don't forget the idiot senator, I added. He is not a jerk, as you so rudely put it. He is an extremely attractive and charming person. He is an outstanding political figure with great responsibility. I would like you to be glad that he wanted to be with me. It was a magical night. Yes, I interrupted. You already told me. It was a wonderful experience. As for your parents, you seemed so content and so confident that I began to wonder if I was being too puritanical, I lied. So I contacted your parents to get their opinion. It was your mother who noticed that you weren't in the conversation and asked about your whereabouts. When I told her that you were on a date at a charity gala with a senator and were going to stay with him at night, she was shocked. Your father also picked up the phone. He didn't like it either. I think their attitude is the same as mine, and I was as appropriately puritanical as I thought. If Hester had a gun, I'm sure she would have shot me. At that moment, I didn't care anymore. You should know that my mom and dad are the same lineage. You'll have to be careful the next time you see my mom. Hester still had a lot to say. I believe you poisoned the children against me and spent the last few days teaching them how terrible their mother is. I replied, Is it like I pulled you away when we got home and the kids ran to you with hugs and stories? I would never do that, no matter how much you hurt me, how much you hurt me. Our marriage and destroyed our family. I didn't damage our marriage or destroy our family, she accused. The continuation of our marriage is up to you. A real man would have realized what a great opportunity this was and wouldn't have let his huge ego stop us from moving on as if it was no big deal. If you want to be vindictive and file for divorce, you'll end up being a father who sees his kids every other weekend. At that moment, I had enough. I threw my drink in her face. She stepped back, completely stunned by my unexpected reaction to her ultimatum. I stood up and walked towards her with clenched fists and a threatening growl. My assertive expression caused her to retreat until she fell onto the leather sofa, looking at me with fear, waiting to see what demons I might unleash. I leaned over her and looked straight into her face. Until a few weeks ago, I had the perfect wife. She was beautiful, gentle, and faithful. But something happened that changed that. Almost instantly, you seemed to lose all respect for me. You were insolent and insulting. Before the date, you accused me of being a petty person with a sick mind. You openly flirted with the senator and humiliated me at a charity ball. You announced that you were going on a date with the senator without my permission, and you were going to spend the night having sex with him. Now you're assuming that I'm not a real man and that I'm the problem. In my ego. The worst thing is that you threaten me with the loss of my children if I do not ignore your betrayal. You don't seem to understand the gravity of your situation, Hester, so listen carefully. I don't love you anymore. You killed that love the moment you walked out the door to be with another man. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had several days and long nights to think about it. If it weren't for the children, I would have already filed for divorce. Hester tried to object. You can't mean it, Reg. I know you love me. You're not listening, Hester. I don't love you anymore. You killed that love when you turned into a whore. I don't even want to touch you. You're defiled by the senator's touch. And what's funny is that you don't even realize how far you've come. You didn't realize that your wonderful experience was actually a real storm. If I came home to a wife who was ashamed and full of remorse for what she did to her husband and her marriage, and truly regretted her actions, then perhaps we would have some a chance for eventual reconciliation. But you didn't even apologize for your actions. But I said I was sorry I hurt your feelings, Hester intervened. That should be enough to forgive you. We can move on from here. She did not yet understand and was selfishly blind to the storm that was breaking around her. Understand this, Hester. I will never forgive you for what you did to me, our marriage, and our children never. I walked away from Hester, and she took advantage of the less dramatic confrontation to gather her thoughts. So what are you going to do, Reg? She asked. Are you going to file for divorce and try to get custody of the children? If I could, I would, I replied. But I doubt the courts will give me custody of Alice and Nate, considering how young they are. Plus, you've been a good mother. They need you at this time in their lives. However, from now on, my children are the only thing that matters to me. And although I really don't like it, I'm going to stay married to you for now and try to provide my kids with a normal family life. You have no idea how much I dislike your presence, but I will endure this until Alice and Nate grow up and will not leave home. After this, you can be sure that I will file for divorce. When we are with children, I will be cheerful and joyful. When we interact, I will be polite and courteous. I will even show affection and hug you or hold your hand. But when we are alone, I do not want to have anything in common with you. Hester, through some sobs, asked, Shall we sleep together? I've thought about sleeping in the guest bedroom, but I don't want the kids to see that kind of relationship between us. I'll sleep in our bed with you, but I won't have sex with you. You think you can resist me forever, Reggie? Hester said. I know that you will not resist sooner or later. We will need each other, and then you will forgive me. If you're talking about sex, Hester, you should know that I now consider our marriage open. You're free to sleep with whoever you want. Likewise, I'll feel free to sleep with whoever I want. Unlike your last date, I'm extremely discreet, and I expect the same from you. I don't want anyone but you, Reggie, said Hester. It's you that I need. I know I hurt you. I hurt you deeper than I could ever imagine, but you're the only man for me for life. What I did was a one-time thing. It won't happen again. Come on. A little bird told me that you came home on Saturday afternoon around 1 p.m. My guess is you had sex with the senator in the morning and maybe again while you were taking a shower. Why not? You spent time with him all night. Why not a few times before you have to leave? Hester was outraged. A b'y must mind her own business, she exclaimed. Well, maybe you shouldn't be so obvious about it in front of her, and God knows how many other neighbors. Hester tried to justify herself. It was just a goodbye kiss, and I only said what I said to be polite and to show that I had a good time. It seems to me that you will not hesitate to run to him when he returns to the city. In fact, I have no doubt that if the senator came to our front door right now, you wouldn't grab him right away. Hester tried to defend herself again. I admit that I am strongly attracted to Tom, so much so that I dared to risk your disfavor to have sex with him. If you hadn't overreacted like you did now, but rather forgave me for this little indiscretion in our marriage, I might have thought about dating him again, but next time I would have been very careful and hidden from you on any date so that you don't find out. It's good to know, but I don't trust you, and I don't want anyone that I don't trust and respect me as my wife. Moreover, I would not want a wife who would be capable of such treacherous betrayal of the person they claim to love. Except for the children, our marriage is over, I concluded. We went to bed, Esther on her side, I on mine. The last thing she said before I fell asleep was, You will forgive me. I know that you will forgive me. She spent most of the night crying and sobbing. I did not care. The next day, the new normal began. Surprisingly, We were able to successfully pull off our ruse in front of Eliza and Nate. Hester and I became more like roommates than husband and wife. In our daily interactions with each other, she was pleasant, and even pleasant to be around like the Esther I knew before all this began. As anyone could imagine, there were times when I woke up with Hester curled up next to me, or with us in the spooning position. As soon as I realized that I was touching her, I would move to my side of the bed. One Friday afternoon, Hester came up to me and said that her parents wanted her and the children to stay with them for the weekend. I think they want to scold me because of what you told them. You mean the truth, I said. Well, maybe this is your opportunity to talk some sense into them, make them see that it's actually my fault, I said sarcastically. That's exactly what I'm going to do, she replied defiantly. When Hester returned on Sunday afternoon, she was silent and withdrawn. I cooked dinner for everyone and put the kids to bed after their bath. Hester sat silently on the patio the entire time. I walked outside with a glass of wine for each of us. I lit a fire in the fire pit and sat back to watch it burn. We were both silent until Hester spoke. "Do you want to know what happened?" she asked. "I can imagine," I replied. "They called me a whore. Both. My dad said that if my mom had done to him what I did to you, he would have hit her and thrown her out of the house, locking the door behind her. My mom said that if she did to Daddy what I did to you, she would expect him to hit her and throw her out of the house." I interjected. "Didn't you explain to them that it was my fragile ego that prevented us from recovering from your wonderful experience with the senator?" Of course, I explained. They made fun of me. They said that any man with an ounce of pride and self-respect would have divorced me long ago. Only the children are keeping us together for now. For a minute, I thought her parents might have gotten through to her. But then she added one last argument that killed any hope that she might understand. "As if it would happen," she said. "They just don't understand the nuances of modern marriage." I was disappointed that her mom and dad couldn't enlighten her. I poured my wine on the fire, went back into the house, and poured myself 2 shots of spiced rum, returning to the patio with a bottle. I sat there long after Hester had gone to bed, eventually falling asleep on the patio chair. I woke up just before 2 in the morning and awkwardly went to the bedroom to pass out. I knew that I would soon have to discharge myself, otherwise I would succumb to Hester's persistent persuasion. I considered having sex with her to get some relief, but I knew she would take it as the beginning of forgiveness, and I didn't want to give her that satisfaction, so I came up with another plan. On Thursday, I told Esther that I had a date on Friday night, and that I would be home late. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed. "Here I am trying to make our marriage work by getting back into a relationship with you, and you going on a date for fun, I guess." "I certainly hope so," I said. "Let me remind you that our marriage broke up. We are husband and wife only on paper. We live together only for the benefit of the children. You've opened the door to extramarital dating, and as I already told you, as far as I understand, we have an open marriage." "Who the hell are you that you're going to have fun with?" Esther demanded to know. "It's none of your business," I replied and left. On Friday, without telling Hester, I took the kids to my parents' house for the weekend. I told Esther that, unlike her, I didn't want my children to see me dressed for a night out without her. When Hester saw me coming down the stairs in a black 3-piece suit, I knew she was angry, but I didn't care. She may have begun to understand a little bit about what I was going through. Once on the landing a few steps above the floor, I did a little pirouette, just as Esther had done before going out on a date. "What do you think, I said. I looked good, and I knew it. The fitted vest, black tie, and patent leather shoes gave me an almost formal appearance. "When have you ever looked so good to me?" asked Hester. "Perhaps when I was in a tuxedo at the fundraising dinner where you first rejected me in favor of the senator." And then I added, "At least I didn't go buy a new suit for my date like you bought a new dress for yours." Esther clenched her teeth when she heard me mention her date. However, she was curious about my plans since I was fully dressed. "First, we are going to have dinner at the Cosmos Club, and then we will go to the City Theater and see the play. The Purple Pimpernel. After that, we'll go to the bar after closing for a drink and a dance. And after that? Asked Hester. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll take her to her house and then come home. It depends on the situation. After all, it's just a first date. But you never know what can happen on a first date, right? At that moment, I took the keys and left the house, leaving a distraught Esther to ponder our situation. On my way to a date, I stopped at the grocery store and bought a bouquet of flowers. Even though I had known her for several years, I was actually a little nervous. I haven't dated in over 10 years. My companion was as beautiful as a movie star. She went out of her way to look amazing for me. A tight, low-cut black mid-calf cocktail dress with a thigh-high slit, high heels, and French-style thigh-high stockings. My evening went as I had hoped. Dinner, theater, dancing. While at the club, I asked the waiter to take a photo of us together. My companion put one hand on my shoulder and the other on my chest. I had a glass of wine in my hand. I sent a photo to Hester. We had a really good time, and by the end of the evening, we were both happy because we had drunk a lot. I felt better and more confident in my situation than I had in months. When I took her home, I realized that I really liked her and had more respect for her than I thought. She was a truly good person, and I really enjoyed talking to her. I wouldn't feel comfortable using our mutual relaxation to have sex with her. Instead, I kissed her goodbye on the porch, and she kissed me back, which lasted more than a minute. I carefully returned home, as I was probably close to being technically intoxicated. It was 1:30 in the morning, but Hester was waiting for me, and she was very angry. "You slept with Angie," she exclaimed. "You chose this slut. She's not even your friend. She's my friend. And now she'll spread around the school that she had fun with you. How can I live with this now?" Hester couldn't understand that what she thought I did to her was exactly what she did to me, so I had no sympathy for her. I walked past her and up the stairs to the bedroom. I was tired. Hester decided to spend the night in the guest room. Late the next morning, I texted Angie to let her know that Hester thought I had sex with her and to be prepared for Hester to hit her about it. Hester was still angry all Saturday afternoon. "How would you feel if I came out and cheated?" she challenged me. "You already did it," I reminded her. Besides, I told her that she can do whatever she wants. I did not care. I did my Saturday chores around the house. On Sunday, she was just as angry, so I apologized and asked to pick up Elsie and Nate from my parents' house. I stayed there most of the day. On Monday, returning from work, Esther was much more conciliatory. I didn't know why until I heard from Angie that Hester had been hitting on her in the staff room. It was at this point that Hester found out that Angie and I hadn't had sex since our date. That night, Esther returned to the master bedroom. She stated that my lack of sex with Angie meant that I might still be able to forgive her. I assured her that was not the case. However, she continued to expect me to eventually come to my senses. The new normal continued for several more weeks. I talked to her a little more and found out that it was one of our neighbor's children who approached her with words about the Club of Libertines. I guess I no longer had to wonder what my neighbors, some or all of them, were talking about. I had several supporters who offered to help in any way they could. One of them was Abigail. At times, she would invite me to sit on her porch and drink beer in full view of the neighbors who might think that we would do something intimate with her. Abigail noted that although she dated a lot and sometimes brought a friend home for the night, she always kept a safe distance from any of the husbands on the block, although they sometimes tried to flirt with her. She said that she could not afford to earn a reputation as a slut, otherwise her wives would run her out of town. Esther's mother was very supportive of my position and said that she completely understood my feelings. However, she fervently hoped that I could eventually forgive her and restore our strong marriage bond. "We didn't raise Esther to be so stupid. Please don't ever think that we are condoning her behavior. We understand this no better than you. I know you're only still together because of the kids," she told me. "I hope this is enough to get you two on the path to reconciliation." I told her I didn't know how long I could continue like this, even for the sake of the children. I wanted a normal family environment for them, but it feels like it's falling apart at the seams. The illusion that Esther was committed to reconciliation lasted only a month. Hester did not want to change the status quo other than to normalize our relationship as wife and husband. One night after the kids were put to bed and I was relaxing and watching a replay of the Cowboys-Patriots game I had missed, Esther came into the living room. Walking over to me, she turned off the lights until the living room was only light from the TV. I started asking her what she was doing when she plopped down on my lap, wearing only one of my loose shirts and skimpy panties. Her shirt was unbuttoned and her breasts were on full display and just inches from my face. "See anything you like?" she purred. "I'm not made of stone." Hester must have noticed this from sitting on my lap. However, when I looked at her beautiful breasts, I remembered that the last person to touch her was a senator, and that repulsed me. "Please, Reggie, if you don't want to make love to me, at least have sex with me." "That won't happen, Hester," I replied. "You are probably the most beautiful woman I have ever known. However, I have had more girlfriends since school, and I thought they were all the prettiest when I dated them. I'm sure I can feel this way about someone else in the future, but not you. I'm staying with you only to provide my children with a semblance of a normal family life." Esther became upset and retreated to the bedroom while I watched the football game I missed. I was suspicious of Esther's apparent desire to be exclusive again. When the game was over, I went to bed. However, I did not sleep. Around Zathilzo, I quietly slipped out of my side of the bed and walked over to the nightstand on Esther's side. Each of us charges our mobile phones at night on the bedside table. I turned off Esther's phone, touched the screen to revive it, and then held it up to Esther's sleeping face. He recognized her face immediately, and I had access to her messages and emails as well as her security system. I learned her digital login code so I could access her phone whenever I wanted. I quickly scanned her texts. What I found did not make me convinced that Hester wanted our old relationship back. She was still hanging out with the idiot senator. He constantly told her what a wonderful time he had with her and looked forward to his next meeting. He promised her a more discreet date next time so that her husband wouldn't make her life any more difficult than it already was. Reading between the lines, it was obvious that he wanted to let me know that he had slept with Hester. A month later, we organized a regional summer barbecue for the entire block. Since it was at our house, I was the head cook. I spent most of my time outside at the grill, but every now and then I had to go inside for something or other. At one point, I needed to go to the toilet, so I walked through the house to the guest toilet on the ground floor. As I walked past my office, I noticed that the door was closed. I could hear women's voices coming from my office, and I stopped to listen. I heard my wife say, "It was the most exciting night of my life. This big, strong, handsome man chose me, and as soon as we were in his hotel room, he got what he wanted. It was the most wonderful sexual experience of my life." I heard women laughing. There must have been 3 of them in the room. One of the 3 said, "I wouldn't be able to be as open as you are. I'd have to wait until Bill was away on a business trip for a few days so I could do this without letting him find out." Another said, "Are you going to see him again?" She replied, "We're still in contact, but he has no plans to travel here anytime soon." Another wife said, "If he were interested in Menno, just like you, I would come up with some excuse to go to Washington and spend the night with him." I was ready to explode. It took incredible restraint not to burst into the room. Instead, I went to the restroom and then returned to the patio. I stood at the barbecue with a bottle of beer in my hand, trying to cool down. I realized in those moments that all my efforts to create a normal life for my children were in vain. There was no way to continue pretending with an unrepentant wife. It's time to change something, and on a big scale. I noticed when Hester left the house with 3 other wives. They looked at me and laughed. This was my signal. I hit his body loudly with a long barbecue spatula. Everyone looked at the noise. I lined up on the patio and asked in a loud voice, "Is there anyone here who doesn't know that my wife had sex with Senator Noberto about 4 months ago?" Only one person started to raise his hand, but he lowered it back when I looked at him. Are there any women who have not heard Hester describe in detail the night she spent with that idiot? Only 2 women out of 12 raised their hands. And I'm guessing all the wives have told their husbands what they know, right? Nobody said anything, and I didn't expect it. Well, ladies, there may be something you don't know that Hester may not have told you, and that is that I haven't touched her intimately since that night. She basically ended our marriage and killed all the love I ever felt for her. The only reason I stayed in the house was to create the appearance of a normal family environment for my children, but now I understand that this is impossible and I will no longer pretend. So for you wives who want this kind of experience, don't hesitate to sleep with some hot guy when you think it will be a thrill that is more important than your family. You husbands should know that since I haven't touched Hester for months, she's more than ready for sex. If any of you can get away from your wives if you marry her for a few hours and show up at my back door, you can probably easily get her into bed. Let the wives worry about that possibility, I thought to myself. Finally, you should all know that other than Abigail, none of you are welcome in my home anymore. I looked at Abigail and smiled at her to let her know that she was special to me. She understood. Having said this, I retired to the house. An angry Hester found me in the bedroom, packing several suitcases. "What the hell are you doing?" she said angrily. "You embarrassed me terribly in front of our friends." "I'm leaving," I replied. I was crazy to think that I could live the next 14 years of my life pretending to live in a happy family environment with an unrepentant wife. Perhaps if you were full of remorse and shame for your actions, we could somehow overcome this with time and some help from a consultant, but I can see that never happening. I continued packing. "Where are you going to go? What about the kids? Are you going to leave us?" "I need to get away from you," I replied. "I'll talk to the kids before I go. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm going to do. Once I figured that out, I'll contact you. In the meantime, don't try to contact me. I won't answer. I'll call home every evening to talk to the children before bed." "Please, Reggie, don't do this," Hester begged, seeming to realize that her plan to reunite the family was failing. "It's not that bad. We can still fix it if you just look at it as a small obstacle compared to having a long, wonderful life together." I replied, "I am tired of humiliation, pain, and anger. That's all I feel when I'm around you. I'm going to change something. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'll let you know when I figure it out." "You won't do this," she answered angrily. "And if it's a divorce, then that's okay too. I was the perfect wife until I found time for myself less than 24 hours. Now, in your opinion, your high moralistic values condemn me for this. I'm not going to apologize anymore for hurting you. If we are going to continue to live as a family, then you will have to forgive one of my indiscretions in our marriage or file for divorce." "Be careful what you wish for, Esther," I countered. "I would really like to be in divorce court and tell the world that I am divorcing my wife because she was seduced by a senator. How do you think he would react if he were named as a correspondent in an adultery case? That's all his chance of being elected dog catcher, much less president of the United States." "You wouldn't do that to such a great man," Esther challenged. "In the blink of an eye," I replied. Esther left the room. I finished packing my things. If I forgot something important, I could return to the house during the day when no one was home. I took my things to my Nissan Sport. Then I walked around the house and went out onto the patio. It was deserted. The gas barbecue was still working. Someone put all the hamburgers and hot dogs on a plate and just left them there. Even though most of their friends had gone home with their parents, my kids were still playing in the sprinklers at the back of the yard. "Where did everyone go, Daddy?" Elise asked. I gathered the children together and explained that I was leaving for a few days, but that I would call them every evening before they went to bed. I asked Eliza to look after her little brother. "Are you leaving because you're mad at your mom?" Eliza asked with wisdom beyond her years. "Yes, I'm mad at my mom," was my truthful answer. "You've been so miserable ever since Mom went to the party without you," she remarked. All those weeks when I thought Hester and I were giving our children the normal family environment we thought they needed. We weren't fooling anyone, except ourselves. The boys felt their parents' concern. They knew something was wrong. The kids followed me to my car, where Hester was waiting with one last request. "Don't do this to us," she wailed. I ignored her. "I'll be back in a week or two. Don't try to contact me." I will not reply. However, I will call home every evening to talk to the children before bed. In the meantime, you can practice being a single mother and see if you like it. If you absolutely need help with the kids, call my mom. I hugged my children for the last time. I cried. They were crying. I didn't recognize Esther when I got into the car and drove away with no destination in mind. The first place I went to was Iris Lounge. This was the club I went to with my work colleagues when we wanted to relax and have a drink. I told the hostess I was going to hang out at the bar for a few hours. I needed to think about my next move. Along with the bourbon and seven, my long-lasting drink, I asked for paper and pen. I started writing down items in no particular order of importance. I then organized the events I wanted to accomplish into a sequence of actions. The first thing I needed to do was simple. I needed a place to stay for the next few weeks. As it turns out, there was a Marriott hotel right across the street from the Iris Lounge. How convenient, I thought. Although I was financially secure and could easily afford a few weeks in a hotel, I knew I needed something more permanent. I was pretty sure I knew all the basic aspects of divorce, but I felt it was important to talk to a lawyer anyway. I will definitely need it if I decide to file for divorce. In addition, I was especially interested in everything related to the custody of my children. I told my boss at work about my situation, and he was kind enough to give me the time I needed to sort things out. I agreed to stay at the Marriott Hotel for a whole month. The manager had the right to assign me a rate for a long stay, a significant discount to the daily rate. In addition, I had concierge privileges. My room was on the same floor as the concierge lounge, where they mostly had breakfast in the morning and almost dinner in the evening. There was also a computer workstation where I could do most of my office work remotely. Over the next few weeks, I spent a lot of time there and in the Iris room. Probably the most significant development of these few weeks was my permanent living situation. I had to change my financial routine a bit, but it didn't put a strain on me in the long run. After 4 weeks away from home, I called Hester and told her I would be home for a few days the following Friday. She said it was time. During the time when she was alone taking care of the children and the house, she was very tired. She said the grass was growing and I needed to cut it ASAP before she got another notice from the homeowners association. She added that I needed to distract the children for a while so she could have some alone time. Hester finally took notice of my words and asked, "What do you mean, you'll be home for a few days? Aren't you planning on coming back for good?" I told her that I would explain everything when I saw her. As soon as the kids got home from school on Friday, I pulled up in the new Nissan Rogue Murano Platinum. I was greeted with hugs and kisses from Elsie and Nate as soon as I stepped out of the car. Elsie was the first to comment on my new vehicle. "Oh my God, Dad, when did you buy this?" "Last week. We needed something bigger than the Rogue Sport if we wanted to fit all our camping equipment in the car. Plus, we needed a bigger car so we could tow our boat when we bought it." Hester followed the children to the car, but did not try to hug me or greet me in any kind way. As the kids climbed around the car, she said, "I'm glad you're finally home. Now we can all have dinner together, which is a change. I'll only be here until Sunday evening. Then I'll be gone again for a few days. I'll explain the schedule to you after dinner." The evening with the children went well. We didn't have any plans for Friday night until I suggested we go to a movie and then dessert. The children loved the idea, and even Hester was excited to get out of the house as a family. We picked out a kid-friendly movie from a nearby theater. After that, we went to Baskin-Robbins for ice cream. When we returned home, I gathered Hester and the children for a serious conversation. I spoke to the children. As you know, your mom and I didn't get along very well the last few months before I left. We had some disagreements that made us wonder if we should live together. I realized that if I lived at home full-time, I would be very unhappy to be around your mother all the time because she wants me to forgive what she did that hurt and angered me very much. You mean she went to the party without you? Elsie suddenly blurted out. Hester was surprised to hear Elsie's comment. She realized that the little antics of that night, when she had gone out dressed up, had made a deep impression on Elsie. That's right, I confirmed. I went to the party. The problem was that I couldn't stay with your mom, but I couldn't stop being your dad. Your mom suggested that if I couldn't forgive her, then maybe we should get a divorce. Divorce would mean that I wouldn't see much of you children, and again, I didn't want to lose the opportunity to be your dad. Besides, if I weren't allowed to spend a lot of time at home with you, then your mother would be responsible for everything, taking care of you too, taking care of the house and garden, cooking, shopping, maintaining cars, etc. This is a big job, so big that she might not have time to play with you. I looked at Hester as I said this. So what I did was, I bought a townhouse not far from here. It's a very nice 3-bedroom townhouse in the gardens, a gated community of townhomes, patio houses, condos, and apartments. My unit is the end unit in the family area. I'm next to a large patio with 2 swimming pools, gas barbecues, and large tables with umbrellas. There is a children's playground and a small park. This townhouse will be my new home away from home. I made a large down payment a few weeks ago and plan to close in a week. My goal is to live in my townhouse, but visit our home here often during the week. I'll try to come back every Friday after school and stay until I put you to bed on Sunday night. Also, I will be coming here on Tuesday or Wednesday evening to see you and have dinner together as a family. Elsie understood everything I said. Can we come to your place and swim in the pools? She asked. Of course you can, I replied. You can also stay the night with me if you want. I will have a bedroom for each of you. This will be so much fun, exclaimed the delighted Elsie. Nate didn't understand everything that was said, but he seemed happy because Elsie was happy. After a few minutes of explanation, Hester and I sent the children to bed after bathing them and reading to them at night. Once we were back together in the family room, Hester said, "So this is your answer to divorce or no divorce?" "Yes," I said. "Where did you get the money to buy a townhouse?" she asked. I said, "I used the money we were saving for a lake house." My logic was that I simply transferred money from one pocket, the Fidelity account, to another, the townhouse, which would likely increase in value at least as quickly as the Fidelity account. With such an important purchase and lifestyle change, it might be worth discussing it with me first before making such a big decision. How did you discuss your date with the senator with me? I reminded her. She turned away with a hurt expression on her face, as if it wasn't fair for me to remind her why we were going through this. Hester still had many questions and continued to insist. Where have you been for the last 4 weeks? The office only said that you were working from home. I lived at the Marriott. It was very relaxing compared to living at home. Room service, housekeeping, gym, pool, concierge service. I spent most of my time there or at the Iris Club. And you made friends at the Iris Club? Hester asked, clearly implying that I might have started a relationship with a woman, or women while I was away. I've met some nice ladies, Hester, but that's none of your business. What I do socially is now my own business, just as what you do socially is now your own business. Don't forget, you were the one who opened our marriage. I love you, Reggie. What I did was a one-time thing. Tepdam, I want you to be home with me and the kids. I don't want to be a single mother. I'll be home often enough to make your life a little easier. I'll mow the lawn and take out the trash. I'll take care of car maintenance and all the other things I did when we were a real family. Please, Reggie, I need your care too. I love you and I want you in our bed. That won't happen. When I stay the night, I'll sleep in the guest room. I no longer have any desire to be intimate with you. But what about me? You apparently have your girlfriends from the Iris Club to please you. What should I do? What about me? Why don't you contact the senator and ask him to come see you again? If he can't come, maybe he can send one of his goons to entertain you in his place. More realistically, you'll have to find someone local for sex. If you have a date, I can take the kids to my place so they won't see you dressed for the date and won't see you when you get home the next morning. I was hoping that we could be together again, just the two of us, like we were before all this. Before the senator returns to town, I asked sarcastically. You don't understand, Hester. You still don't regret what you did and expect me to ignore that night of bliss. I don't trust you not to do it again, especially if I forgave you the first time. Misconduct. I'm not going to put myself in that position anymore. Besides, Hester, such a device could work well for both us and the children. The new normal has worked very well for me. I was much more relaxed. Hester was freed from the burden of being a single mother and became happier. The agreement wasn't perfect, but it was much better than the alternatives of living together or getting divorced. And it was much cheaper. Although I had the cost of another mortgage, it was no more than what I paid into my Fidelity account each month for the lake house and was within my financial means. I took Eliza and Nate with me when I bought furniture for the house. They felt like they helped decorate it. I used drawings that Eliza and Nate made in class at school, framed them, and hung them on the walls for some coloring. I gave them a lot of freedom in decorating their own bedrooms. I began to enjoy my time as a B-class bachelor. At least there was no conflict between me and Esther when I was alone. And while at home, I agreed with Esther to refrain from all mention of her night with the senator until she attempted to mention it in some ploy to seduce me or justify it. However, I know that she still hoped that I would forgive her and resume our marriage as it was before the incident. Over time, I began to make friends at the townhouse, usually meeting people by the pool on weekends when Eliza and Nate came to swim. In fact, they made friends with the other kids at the pool, and I got to know their parents. Over time, I developed a close relationship with several single moms in the townhouse complex, and we all hung out together on the weekends and met by the pool in the evenings when the kids weren't around. They were happy to have someone nearby who could give guidance to their children, something that an absent father could not do. I often took the time to teach their children to swim or make sure they didn't drown. Meanwhile, Hester took my advice and left the children with me for the weekend while she dated men she met at school and other places. She expressed to me the opinion that she did not like to relieve herself from time to time with such social entertainment. She said she would rather have sex with me. In fact, she said that she misses the loving times we spent together. She craved the hugs and affection and conversations we enjoyed before her date with the senator, even though at the time she considered it routine and predictable. It didn't take long before Hester started hearing about the friends our kids had met at the townhouse. And then she found out about the women who became friends with me. She was curious. When she found out that my friends and I were going to have a barbecue at the townhouse, she asked if she could attend too. I told her she could join us. When we arrived at the townhouse pool, several tables had already been pushed together and several of my friends had prepared food for the afternoon. Meanwhile, the children quickly contacted their friends and disappeared into the pool. I was considered the cook, and I opened the refrigerator to see the hot dogs, hamburgers, and corn that would be grilled that afternoon. Hester was most interested in my friends, and they were very interested in her. They made a place for her among them and were extremely merciful to her. She didn't understand why they were so kind to her. They were Andrea, Belinda Bell, Carmen, Roxanne Roxy, and Kate. To illustrate, Andrea was a beautiful black woman. She had a slender figure and more than ample breasts. She loved showing off her body in an almost risque bikini. Belle was a full-bodied woman with the right curves in all the right places, thanks to her extremely narrow waist and flat stomach. She was an eternally happy person and always had a smile on her face. She was the most outgoing of the five. Carmen was also slim. It was hard to believe that she had children. She looked sporty. She wore a two-piece swimsuit easily, although not as provocative as Andrea's. Roxanne Roxy was the pixie in the group. She was only about 5'1" and tall and was very cheerful and outgoing. Roxy was about 35 years old, but her enviable smooth skin made her look like a teenager. Kate was the quietest. Although she easily fit in with the other ladies, she sometimes seemed withdrawn. Kate was average in every way. Average height 5'5", average build, average length brown hair, and average pretty face. You'll have to call her the girl next door. I can't believe you're all so kind to me, Hester asked the entire group. We owe you a lot, Andrea stated. What did I oblige you to do? Hester asked. Well, Belle continued on behalf of the group, if you hadn't set your husband up, he wouldn't be here with us, and we wouldn't be enjoying the benefits of his friendship. Hester looked each of the 5 women in the face. Did you all sleep with him? She asked. Even though I was barbecuing at the time, I was still within earshot of the conversation. It's none of your business, I shouted to Hester. Andrea answered first. I have a boyfriend. He's a co-pilot for American Airlines, and his schedule is usually 3 days on and 3 days off. When he's not here, Reggie is a real asset to me. He helps me with my son James, and his kids have been good friends for James. Roxy continued, my husband became an alcoholic after he lost his job as a salesman for a large manufacturing company. He couldn't find anything better as many companies switched to online advertising. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and divorced him. Now I have 2 small children, a boy and a girl, and I try to make their lives happy. Reggie has helped me and my children in many ways without asking for anything in return, not even sex. It's strange, but since I divorced my husband, he has stopped drinking. I think he misses his children, and perhaps me, more than the bottles. In any case, he has become very attentive over the last year or so about that, and I'm going to wait and see how it goes. Carmen intervened further. My poor husband suffered from bipolar disorder. Over the years, he got worse and worse, and finally had a complete nervous breakdown. He was admitted to a mental hospital and is not expected to recover. Meanwhile, I have 3 children in my arms. I'm lucky to be able to afford a home here at the Gardens, and I'm even luckier to have Reggie as a close friend and surrogate father figure to my children. I love this man to death and would do anything to keep him from doing so. Suffered. Do you understand me? Belle was the next one to reach out to Hester. My husband was a jerk. He was charming when things were going well, but he became aggressive when he felt frustrated. At first, he was verbally aggressive. Then he started pushing me. When he raised his hand to me, I knew I had to leave. I found refuge in an orphanage. From there, I used my education to find a job as a librarian and eventually moved to the Gardens. Belle continued, you may want to know that I slept with your husband. In fact, from my point of view, we were making love. When I found out that he and your children liked camping, I told him that I had lots of camping gear in storage. We decided to go camping together. I had a boy and a girl like you. The boys slept in one tent and Reggie and I ended up in my big tent. Bags, but I persuaded him to unzip them and zip them together as one double sleeping bag. At first he resisted, but then he told me that he would be crazy if he missed such a golden opportunity that we had by not taking advantage of it. I'll never forget him telling me I had the most beautiful breasts of any woman in Northern Virginia. You can't imagine how much I appreciate Reggie. He may never marry me, but I know he loves me a little and that we're as close as we can be. Everyone looked at Kate. I slept with Reggie, but we never had sex. I'm a widow. My husband was a soldier and died in the Middle East a year ago. I still haven't gotten over his loss, but I tried not to let it ruin the lives of my children, Julia and Brad. I was completely surprised when Reggie asked me out a few weeks ago. He didn't know I was a widow still mourning her husband. He was open with me about his marital status and said it would just be dinner and maybe dancing. In my grief and loneliness after the death of my husband, I experienced several short novels and casual relationships. I was almost self-destructive. I really needed a quality social life to be a good mom to my kids. My friends here, and Kate waved her hand at the ladies at the table, set up Reggie to ask me out. I was surprised when during our date, I realized how much Reggie reminded me of my late husband. The way he treated me, the way he spoke, the way he acted, it all reminded me of Joe. When our date ended and Reggie drove me home, he gave me a little thank you kiss on my doorstep. Instead of letting him go, I invited him inside. I told him that I wanted him to spend the night with me, but I wasn't ready to have sex with him. He sensed my inner conflict and agreed to go to bed with me without any expectations of having sex. He hugged me tightly and was silent until I fell asleep crying. Reggie is the kindest person I've ever known. Hester was amazed by the stories of how her husband treated these women. So I ask you again, why do you treat me so well, knowing that I apparently treated Reggie so poorly? Well, said Andrea, we really think you're the stupidest woman in the world. With the exception of Kate, all our husbands have been failures. You, on the other hand, threw away the perfect man to love you for the next 50 years, just for one casual sexual encounter with a man who was an asshole. Roxy is apparently the mathematician of the group. Look at it this way, Hester. If the senator was twice as good in bed as Reggie, you'd have to have sex with Reggie twice to get the same satisfaction you got from the senator once. Over the next 50 years, let's say, Reggie could have sex with you on average 100 days a year, which is 5,000 in total, or the equivalent of 2,500 meetings with the senator. So it seems you've traded one wonderful experience with the senator for 2,500 equivalent sexual encounters with your husband. It's hardly a good deal. I never intended to trade Reggie for Tom, Hester protested. I thought Reggie would be unhappy for a while, but then it would go away when he saw what a good wife I want to be for him from now on. What made you think that? Kate asked. Tom said so, answered Hester. Especially because we have children, Hester argued. He needs to come home and save his family. Kate continued, in our opinion, he already tried to do this. However, you continued to remind him of your wonderful experience with the senator and even bragged about it to your friends. You humiliated him in front of the neighbors and humiliated him for not agreeing with your demand to swallow it. He didn't leave you. You pushed him away. Carmen chimed in. If I did that to my husband, I wouldn't expect him to forgive me. In fact, I'd respect him less if he did. He'd be a weakling if he forgave me and tried to forget about this, and I would lose all respect for him just like you lost all respect for Reggie when he decided to live with you rather than destroy his family. Hester was shocked by the outpouring of criticism from my friends. She stepped back from the conversation and looked into the distance at the pool, where she watched her children play in the water with their friends. Kate finally brought Hester back to reality with an offer to go to the pool and pick up the children from the water, announcing that the hot dogs and hamburgers were ready. Carmen suggested making Hester a plate of potato salad and baked beans. Hester was again amazed that these women treated her so well, even though she had treated me and our marriage so poorly. They spent the rest of the day quite friendly, chatting about their jobs, children, and social lives. As the people prepared to call it a night and send the children to wash and go to bed, Hester received a sincere invitation to return whenever she wished. They even offered to babysit our children if I was busy. Since after I brought my family from our home to the gardens, I had to bring them back. We're told Elise and Julia, Kate's daughter, decided to have a sleepover at home. The girls became very close friends, although they only knew each other for a few months. Hester told the girls they could use the double bed in the guest bedroom to sleep together. When we arrived home, Hester told the children to come inside because she wanted to talk to me alone. As soon as the children left, Hester turned to me. These women adore you. Do you know that? These ladies did a lot to restore my confidence in my own masculinity after my wife made it clear that she wanted another man more than me. I owe them a lot, I replied. And then I added, you once adored me too. Yes, it is, answered Hester. I don't know when or how I lost this feeling for you. It probably started the night of the charity ball when I met Tom. He was a wordsmith and his baritone was almost mesmerizing. He spoke with such eloquence. Unbeknownst to you, he called me a few days after the charity ball, and we talked for over an hour. He said he was attracted to me for some reason, but later admitted that he thought I had a body made for sex and the most beautiful breasts he had ever seen. He also told me that if I had not been with you on the night of the charity ball, he would have invited me to his hotel that evening for a late chat. A few days later, he invited me too. Lunch to an exclusive club where we talked even more and became close enough to share a passionate kiss before leaving. At that moment, he asked me to be his date to a charity gala. He said it would be a plausible reason for us to have an evening together. He also said that you won't take me for granted after this. I knew what he wanted, despite the fact that he didn't talk about it. And by that time, I wanted it too. I told him that you would never approve of an evening with him, although on the surface it might seem like an innocent and blameless event at first. Tom has assured me that if anything were to happen, he's sure you'll appreciate him enough to overcome this, and it will end up being a minor event. He said you would never risk destroying your family. Plus, he added, I'm a U.S. senator, and he should be glad that his wife is beautiful enough to be chosen as my date. What nonsense, I exclaimed. Yes, it was nonsense, Hester agreed. It seemed to me that Hester had some sort of epiphany, perhaps sparked by the open discussion my friends had with her at the barbecue. You'll never come back to me, will you? No, I said. You've hurt me too much. I'll never let you put me in that position again. Plus, I'll never be able to trust you again. Sooner or later, when you get bored with your everyday life as a wife, mother, and schoolteacher again, I will be afraid that you will go into the bedroom of some handsome, eloquent Don Juan again. I won't risk it. I will never make that mistake again, Hester said. Maybe, I replied. Hester began to cry. How could I be so stupid? I didn't answer her. You know what's worse, Reggie? Looking back, I don't think my wonderful experience was that great. I was excited because I was going to sleep with a handsome man with a great figure. But after the first time, after we tore off each other's clothes and had sex, it wasn't as exciting anymore. It wasn't nearly as romantic as I had imagined. I thought I had a great time and didn't want to admit to myself that it wasn't what I expected. When I kissed him goodbye the next day, I didn't let him know that our time together wasn't the best moment of my life. And I didn't admit to our friends' wives that it wasn't the best sex in the world. What I miss more than anything in the world right now is being with you and having a standard, routine, and familiar night of love and sex together, and then hug you together, placing your hand on my chest. Esther sobbed again. I want you to know, Reggie, that I love you more than anything in this world. I'm so sorry I hurt you, and I'm so ashamed that I did what I did to the senator. I would do anything to fix this. Your friends are right. I am the stupidest woman in the world. I was surprised. I witnessed Esther's sincere repentance for what she had done. I wish you could feel that way right after you get home from your date, I said. Perhaps there would be some way to save our marriage. Now it's too late. I wondered if Hester would have felt such remorse if her night with the senator had lived up to her expectations. Well, I said, we're still a family of sorts. We are both committed to our children and have found a reasonable solution to raise them together. I guess that's the best I can hope for, Hester replied. Let's go inside and put the kids to bed, I suggested. Esther agreed. I opened her car door and she got out. Then suddenly she hugged me and hugged me tightly. We stood there for a minute, neither of us said anything. Then she released me and we went into the house. Esther went into the master bathroom first to wash her face and wipe away her tears before letting the girls see her. Our agreement was normalized, and most importantly, our children were happy. We've done a surprisingly good job of organizing our schedule. I often ate dinner at home, and Hester often visited me in my townhouse. Esther became friends with my friends, and we would sit on the patio and have drinks from time to time. We did a lot of things together as a family, such as going to the movies, taking day trips, visiting grandparents, having holiday events, etc. Hester and I dated sparingly, but never really involved the children in our social life. I learned that Hester dated one of the PE teachers from her school quite often. A year has passed since the charity ball and the beginning of the collapse of my marriage. Now that my personal life was more in order, and I had lost much of the anger, pain, and humiliation that I felt immediately after Hester's betrayal, my thoughts turned to the senator. I learned that the senator would be attending the charity ball as he did every year, and a few weeks after that, he will be the center of attention at the annual charity dinner. I started planning revenge. The first thing I did was register on an escort service website. After passing all the character and financial checks, I was able to view the advertisements of individual ladies. I wanted someone who wasn't too young, maybe between 30 and 40 or early 40. Another requirement was the presence of prominent breasts and the ability to demonstrate them. In the end, I chose one. Her name was Wendy Vandyck. According to her photos, she had a great figure, a beautiful face, and, most importantly, impressive breasts. She was about 45 years old, with slight wrinkles on her face. It seemed perfect for my purposes. I met her for coffee and we talked. I learned that she has a bubbly personality, probably necessary in her profession. After we established a friendly relationship, I explained to her what I was up to. I wasn't sure she would want to participate in the activity I had planned, but when she found out it was a jerk senator, she enthusiastically agreed to participate. Next, I needed to find a private investigation agency that could handle the surveillance I needed to do. When I told them I wanted a video of the jerk senator in his hotel room, some of them didn't want to take it on because what they had to do was a little illegal, and they didn't want to get in trouble with the senator. However, one agency recommended to me an individual contractor who was, in fact, an unlicensed private detective specializing in surveillance. I contacted this person. He gave me the name Lance Sterling. I knew that wasn't his real name, but it didn't matter. According to Lance, he worked as an electronic surveillance expert for the FBI. He left the FBI several years ago due to some questionable activities he carried out at the request of his superiors. It turns out that when the FBI couldn't get a surveillance warrant, they sometimes still wanted to spy on a person of interest because they suspected him of committing a crime. In Lance's case, they installed electronic surveillance of the suspect's home. When it was discovered that the surveillance was illegal, several FBI agents were fired or demoted. Lance was also demoted, and rather than resign himself to a lackluster FBI career, he quit and became a freelancer. He laughed, adding that the FBI still uses him from time to time when they need his special skills. I described to Lance what I needed to do. I wanted Senator Norberto's hotel room to be equipped with video and audio systems on the night of the charity ball. Lance found this interesting. It seems that the more difficult the task, the more challenging it was for him. A few days later, he informed me that it would not be easy, but he could do it. He described problems with hotel security, extra security added because of the senator's stay, and a problem with access to the hotel's 17th floor, where 4 penthouse suites were located. He added that he learned that the senator was always protected by his personal security guards, and they even remained outside the door of his room when he entertained women. However, when the senator was away from the hotel, the room was left unguarded. All these devices cost me a lot, but I considered them worth the price. A few days before the charity ball, Lance informed me that the senator's suite had been set up. He installed 7 high-definition video cameras that could record in both bright and low light. He also installed 5 microphones sensitive enough to hear a pin drop anywhere in the act. All this could be transmitted to a central recording machine located in the hotel room directly below the senator's room on the 16th floor, which Lance rented. On the night of the charity ball, I picked Wendy up at her apartment. She was dressed to drive you crazy. She had an elegant floor-length red dress with a thigh-high slit. Her top was an off-the-shoulder style that looked like it was about to fall off, revealing her ample bust. She was the perfect bait for the senator. The only accessory I added was a large diamond brooch. It was given to me by Lance and contained a microphone that fed into the earpiece I was wearing and a digital recording disc that I carried with me. On the way to the charity ball, I again instructed Wendy on what I wanted. I wanted her to make the senator talk about himself as much as possible. I wanted to hear him brag about himself and his skills with women. I wanted him to admit that he had a particular preference for married women and had possibly caused some divorces and perhaps even fathered some children. Wendy was very attentive to the type of braggadocio I wanted from the senator. She told me not to worry because she knew exactly what I needed, and she was a pro at getting men to talk about themselves. Before she got out of the car, I gave her a large, flashy wedding ring and an engagement ring as part of the necessary equipment to lure the senator into bed. I then sent her alone with instructions to take a seat at the table directly in front of the VIP table where the senator could easily see her and notice that she was alone. Meanwhile, I parked the car and a few minutes later entered the club country. Although I didn't think the senator would remember me if he saw me, I played it safe and stayed back at the bar, enjoying my drink and watching Wendy. At one point, the bodyguard who had wronged me a year ago came to the bar to get drinks for the senator. He looked at me for a minute, but did not remember who I was or where he had seen me before. The first hour of the event was social. People got to know each other, discussed beautiful dresses of women, talked about sports, and so on. I spotted the senator as he made his grand entrance with his retinue of important local politicians. For more than an hour during the social hour, the senator walked around the room, shaking hands with many supporters and charming most of the beautiful women. Eventually, he noticed Wendy. He glanced at her several times while continuing to communicate with his fans. Finally, he freed himself from those surrounding him and approached Wendy. "Excuse me, miss," he began, "but do I see that you are here alone?" Wendy looked up at him and pretended to be surprised who was calling her. "Oh my, you're Senator Norberto, aren't you? I've heard so many good things about you." "Yes, it's me," the senator said, looking her over. "Again, if I may ask, are you here alone? You don't seem to have a companion." "No, I'm alone today. My husband was called away on a business trip. I was so angry with him that I decided to come alone. I was supposed to meet my friends here, but they had a family emergency, so I was left all alone." "If I may ask, what is your name?" the senator continued. "My name is Wendy Jones," Wendy answered. The senator took her hand and kissed the back of it. "I cannot allow such a beautiful lady to be alone on such an evening. Let me invite you to my table for dinner. I have several people who would be glad to meet you." "I can't do that, Senator. Your desk is already occupied." "I can think of something," the senator said. He waved at one of his guards to come over. He whispered something in the bodyguard's ear and then returned to his conversation with Wendy. I noticed the bodyguard approach the senator's desk, and after a few minutes one of the guests stood up and left. He didn't look very happy. Meanwhile, the senator continued to shower Wendy with his charms, and she pretended to be enchanted by his attention. When the senator looked back, his bodyguard nodded to him that the table was ready, and Wendy was led to the table. The senator introduced her to the couple sitting at the table and explained that Wendy was alone today and he did not want her to feel excluded from the joyful atmosphere of the event. Several couples at the table rolled their eyes at this announcement, as if they knew the senator's long history with willow women. The night continued as I had hoped. The senator peppered Wendy with stories about life in Washington, jokes about politics, and comments about how effective he was in the Senate. Wendy pretended to be happy about it all. Over time, the senator touched Wendy more and more often, sometimes on the arm, sometimes on the shoulder, and Wendy reciprocated, as if she was fascinated by the senator's attention to her. As the dessert plates were cleared and coffee served, the evening's host took the podium to make the obligatory announcements and introduce the guests of honor, including the senator. The senator was asked to say a few words, which he did professionally. After this, the presenter announced that the dance program would begin immediately after his words. Not only a time to dance, but also a time to continue socializing. Many people approached the senator to introduce themselves to him before he became a little annoyed because he wanted to focus on Wendy. He finally turned to Wendy and said, "Please save me from my constituents by dancing with me." Wendy, of course, agreed. The first dance was slow. The senator was a skilled dancer and easily led Wendy through several loops and spins that showed her off to her advantage. After the song ended, there was soft applause. The next tune was slow, and the senator pulled Wendy close, wrapping his arms around her waist. Although the senator had to dance with the wives of several of his supporters, they danced together most of the time, eventually Wendy wrapping her arms around the senator's neck and he around her waist. The senator was making his final moves towards Wendy in preparation for asking her to sleep with him. As I suspected, his style was to eventually lead Wendy out the back door of the country club and into the garden. There he stopped and kissed her passionately. Wendy, of course, responded with passion in return. He told her that since the first time he saw her sitting alone, he couldn't get her out of his mind. By Ohas, they continued to hug. The senator kissed her neck and then Wendy's upper chest. He couldn't get enough of her. "Where can we go?" Wendy asked, catching her breath. "We can go to my hotel room," the senator replied. He snapped his fingers and one of his bodyguards appeared. "Get the car ready," he ordered. As the senator escorted Wendy to the entrance of the country club, I went to the parking lot to get my car. A few minutes later, I was on my way to the hotel. We arrived at the Hilton around the same time. I was right behind the senator's car in the parking line with the valet. I watched the senator as he pompously escorted this beautiful would-be conqueror into the lobby and straight to the elevators. I followed them a few minutes later, but instead of going to the 17th floor, I went to the 16th floor to the room Lance had rented as an electronic surveillance center. The room was dark, only lit by the light from a large video monitor that illuminated the desk. Lance had set up his audio-video recording equipment and had already started recording. "The show is about to start," Lance said, pulling a second chair up to the table for me. Lance showed 7 video channels on the screen. Clicking on a specific image enlarged that view. No one was in the room yet. Apparently, the senator had to go through hotel security to get to his floor. As I sat down, Lance pointed to the bottle of Captain Morgan's spiced rum he was drinking and invited me to pour myself a shot, which I did. At the same time, the door to the room opened and the senator and Wendy entered. While the door was open, I could see one of the bodyguards standing right outside. Lance zoomed in on the suite's living room. We watched as the senator showed Wendy his luxurious suite. "This is amazing," Wendy said. "You really know how to impress a girl. How much does it cost per night?" "It costs taxpayers a lot of money," the idiot senator responded. "The same taxpayers send me first class wherever I want to go. They even pay for my excursions to almost anywhere I feel I need a vacation. And they pay for escorts who often travel with me in some kind of quasi-working status." He then walked Wendy out onto the veranda and let her admire the impressive view of the city. While she stood leaning on the railing, he came up from behind, hugged her, and kissed the back of her head. She purred and tilted her head to the side so he could kiss her shoulder. Slowly, he turned her to face him and kissed her passionately on the lips. Wendy responded in the same way. It became clear to me that Wendy got a really good deal from this. She was obviously really passionate about her work. No wonder she liked it so much. I just hoped she hadn't forgotten her assignment. She didn't forget. For the next 2 hours, Lance and I watched as the idiot senator had sex with Wendy. Wendy often complimented him on his skill and asked questions like, "Why do you like married women so much?" Or, "Was your jealous husband trying to take revenge because you slept with his wife?" Or, "Do you limit your pursuit of married women to trips outside of Washington, or do you do it at home too?" The idiot senator was very talkative and enjoyed bragging about his love life. Lance and I discussed what we saw, and I took notes on what could be used in the video presentation. While talking with Lance, I learned that he was also an expert in editing the audio and video recordings we made. I told him what product I wanted. I also told him that I wanted Wendy's face to be blurred out so she would be unrecognizable in the video. While the senator and Wendy were sleeping, I fell asleep on the sofa in the room. Lance also took a nap. He turned the volume on his equipment loud enough that it would wake us up if any activity started. Again in the morning, the senator had sex with Wendy. Soon after, he showered alone. When he came out of the bathroom, he told Wendy that he had several morning meetings that he had to go to. He also thanked her for a wonderful night of sex and asked her to get dressed and leave as soon as possible. He said one of his bodyguards would watch her until she left the room. She had to get home herself. As soon as the senator left the room, I texted Wendy and told her I'd meet her in the lobby in an hour. She replied, "You can buy me breakfast." Meanwhile, Lance was gathering his equipment. We agreed to meet the next day and begin editing his 7-hour notes into something much more concise. I met Wendy at the hotel restaurant. She was still in her evening dress from last night. To her didn't care that other hotel guests were staring at her. As soon as she sat down, the first thing she said was, "Now I understand why you call him Senator Idiot." After we ordered breakfast, I thanked Wendy for her presentation. "You did great. I'm sure I have more than enough material to burn the idiot senator." She moved on to another topic. "You must have loved your wife very much to spend so much effort and money to overthrow him." "Yes," I replied. I was deeply hurt when she announced that she was going on a date with the senator. After that, I tried to swallow my pride and save our marriage for the sake of the children, but it didn't work. She was so obvious to everyone after she came home that I was completely humiliated. So I left. I found my place and made new friends. I didn't want a divorce because Hester didn't want a divorce either, but for other reasons. Still loves me, but I didn't feel the love. We settled for an informal separation. I could see my children whenever I wanted without the financial disaster of divorce and without custody restrictions. Wendy responded sympathetically. "It turns out that she went through a divorce many years ago." "No one benefits from divorce," she said. "In fact, everyone loses, especially children." Wendy and I parted as friends. She even invited me to invite her to dinner or a movie with the phrase, "no strings attached." She said I owed her a nice evening after what I put her through. The next day, Lance and I started working with audio-video recordings. Within 2 weeks, we had a collection of scenes and statements from a senator that we felt would burn him down. The senator's annual fundraising dinner took place 3 weeks after the charity ball. It was expensive, $500 a plate, but I bought 2 plates at the event. Esther found out that I was going to dinner and asked what interested me in the senator. All I said was, "I owe it to him." I asked Belle if she wanted to help me get revenge on Senator Asshole. She was more than willing to engage in a little mischief at such an elegant event. I told her I was using her as bait to lure the senator to our table at a fundraiser. In addition, I told her that I needed her to buy a ball gown that would show off her wonderful breasts. She insisted that I go shopping with her, and we visited several high-end fashion stores together until she found the perfect dress for us. It was a dark blue strapless dress that made her breasts look like they were about to burst. The long evening dress had a thigh-high slit. Belle also asked me to buy a pair of blue CF&M high heels to match her outfit. A necklace with a sea green pendant and matching earrings completed the set. We arrived at the country club where the fundraising dinner was to take place on time. I was wearing a tuxedo and thought I looked good. Belle, of course, wore her ball gown and was an instant hit with all the men. I think some of them were even drooling over her attractive cleavage. After presenting our tickets, we were shown seats at a round table for 10 people. It wasn't particularly close to the dais where the senator sat with other functionaries of his political party, but I didn't expect him to see us from his lunch seat. 3 other couples were already sitting at the table, and we introduced ourselves. When asked how I related to Senator Noberto, I simply replied that I had met him once and hoped to speak with him sometime during social hour or during the informal part of the evening after dinner and speeches. All our table neighbors were ardent conservatives. At $500 a plate, I wouldn't expect anything less. However, we all interacted in a friendly manner. Belle and I took advantage of the free hour to wander around the ballroom, looking at the many political posters that decorated the room. We chatted with several couples and small groups, some of whom were just as eager as we were to meet new people and perhaps make new friends. I noticed that there were quite a few men vying for Bell's attention. About 30 minutes after most of us arrived, Senator Asshole made his grand entrance, surrounded by his closest political associates and friends. As before, I noticed that he was a man of imposing figure, tall, well-built, with a square jaw. It is not surprising that women were impressed by his charisma and swagger. The senator was surrounded by fans, mostly men, who wanted to shake his hand or take photos. I noticed that his two bodyguards were nearby, controlling the crowd to prevent him from being overwhelmed by too many people at once. They gradually pushed people away, giving the senator the opportunity to influence the crowd with handshakes. He obviously knew many of the people at his table and wanted to express his gratitude to them. He was an experienced politician. Shortly after Bell and I returned to our table, we heard the bell ringing, signaling that dinner was ready to be served. Another 15 minutes passed before the salad arrived. After this, the large and efficient staff quickly served dinner. When dessert and coffee were served, the host announced a 20-minute restroom break before the performances. I told Belle to take a break, but not to come back until everyone was seated again and introduced to each other. When she returned, she clearly stood out in the room with her beautiful blue dress and ample breasts. The presenter even fell silent for half a second. At that moment, I had no doubt that the senator had seen her too. Since then, I have been watching the senator and noticed that he looked in our direction from time to time, although we were off to the side and not so close to him. Regardless of the reason we were there, Belle and I had a great time together. When we weren't eating, we held hands either above or below the table. She often touched my arm or shoulder to express her affection. At one point, I leaned over and kissed her bare shoulder. She seemed to really like it. Finally, after some awards and thanks, the senator gave a speech. It was a rousing call to action across party lines. It was performed well by his baritone voice, and the crowd gave him a standing ovation. Neither Belle nor I stood up. Following the speaker, the presenter announced another break, during which the group would take their place and the dancing would begin. I expected quick action from the senator. However, it took longer than I expected because, again, several people surrounded him and wasted his time. However, he motioned for his bodyguards to remove their well-wishers so he could mingle. And that's exactly what he seemed to be doing, moving slowly in our direction. The band's opening tune was the up-tempo dance Don't Break My Heart, originally made famous by Elton John and Keek D. I was a very good dancer and could dance an average song without ever repeating a move. Belle was a great follower, and I took her through lots of swirls and spirals and swirls that made her look good. When the music stopped, we were applauded by other dancers and a guest sitting near the dance floor. I walked Belle back to our table. I took this opportunity to tell Belle that I was going to get us a drink and that she should expect a visit from the senator very soon. The bar was crowded, but despite this, I took extra time before returning to my table. As I approached, I noticed that the senator was sitting in my seat, facing Belle, with his hand on her knee. Her ball gown showed off most of her curvy legs. At first, a bodyguard tried to stop me, saying that the senator was talking to a constituent and should not be disturbed. I stated very emphatically that the senator was talking to my companion, and I intended to sit down at my desk. The bodyguard let me through rather than make a fuss. I walked up to the table and turned to Belle. "I have your pina colada." The senator did not notice my presence. Based on previous experience in this situation, I did not expect this from him. "Honey, have you met Senator Noberto?" Belle told me. "Informal," I replied, handing one drink to Belle and placing the other on the table. Belle stood up and moved away from the chair. This step was unexpected for Senator Asshole. "You two might want to talk," she said. I sat down in her chair facing the senator. Perhaps he expected me to bring up one or more political topics that he wasn't really in the mood to discuss at the moment. Rather, he was ready, and I prevented his seduction. "Senator," I turned to him, "I have something I want to talk to you about." The senator was slightly puzzled by what had just happened. A beautiful woman with huge breasts had just pushed him away, and now he was faced with some stranger who wanted to talk about politics. Moreover, this beautiful woman was now standing behind me, with one hand on my shoulder and the other holding her drink. She had a puzzled expression on her face. "What do you want to talk about, mister? Whatever your name is, make it quick," said the senator. "Revenge. I want to talk about revenge, Senator," I said. "What revenge?" asked the senator. "You don't remember me, Senator." "What is your name?" asked the senator. "My name is Gavin, Reginald Gavin," I replied. "I'm sure you don't remember me, but perhaps you remember my wife, Esther." The senator had to think for a moment, and he clearly did not remember Esther's name well. Hester was my wife. Last year, at this very event, she was with you at the fundraising dinner. After that, you took her to your hotel room. "Oh, I remember Esther. What a beautiful woman. What beautiful breasts she has. I hope one night with me won't be something you can't handle. I hope I didn't ruin it for you." The senator laughed loudly. I didn't respond to his verbal jab. "Well, Senator, I don't know if you ruined it or not. I haven't had sex with her since that night. However, you ruined my marriage, and that's why I'm here tonight to get revenge. You ruined my life, now I'm going to ruin yours. And how do you think you can do this? You forget that I am a United States Senator. If you even think about harming me, I will crush you socially, financially, and, if necessary, physically. Others have tried it before you, and they all lie in the dust." I tilted my head back and Belle handed me a small gift box. "This is for you, Senator. This is the end of your life as you know it." Senator Asshole was skeptical, but he was curious. He didn't think it was a bomb, but being careful, he called one of his 2 bodyguards, gave him the box, and told him to open it at some distance. The senator turned to me and asked, "Why are you taking the trouble to introduce yourself to me? You could have left me this box abnormally. Now I know who you are." "Well, Senator," I said, "real revenge requires that the person who wronged me, that is, you, know exactly what the revenge was for. In this case, you destroyed my marriage. But revenge must also inflict colossal retribution on the offender. This is you again, far exceeding the amount of pain caused. Something that lasts a lifetime." At this moment, the bodyguard returned to the table and opened the box. "There's nothing here except a flash drive, sir, and a piece of paper with a web address on it." Senator Asshole was starting to get a little worried at this point. "Go get your laptop," he commanded. "Find out what's on it." The bodyguard disappeared into the crowd again. "You should know, Mr. Gavin, whatever it is, it won't hurt me. I have survived crucifixion in the Senate, innuendo in the press, lawsuits by individuals, including women, and negative advertising from the other side in favor of the years I persisted because I am a great senator and know how to manipulate the system and people. As for women, I think they are God's gift to men, and to me in particular. I don't regret taking your wife. She was seething in my arms even before we got back to the hotel. You'll just have to accept the fact that—" At this moment, the worried bodyguard returned. "Senator, you need to see this. This is bad." Senator Asshole couldn't imagine what could have affected him as much as his bodyguard indicated. The senator disappeared into the crowd, pushing aside people who wanted his attention, and followed the bodyguard. Belle reached behind me and whispered in my ear, "Is it time to go?" Leaving the fun behind, we walked past each table and left a small box with a ribbon and a tag that read, "Senator Norberto's compliments." We made sure to leave one box for each VIP at the main table. By the time Belle came downstairs, I had breakfast ready, including a mimosa. We were wondering how long it would take for the process to get going, so we tuned the TV to a news station. It didn't take long. Fox News was the first to report that an unverified video of Senator Tom Norberto is circulating online, showing him in a highly compromising situation with a married woman. Later that morning, MSNBC reported that the video had been analyzed by video experts. They found that neither video software nor artificial intelligence software were used to alter the video in any way. Additionally, Senator Norberto's voice was confirmed as his own through voice recognition software analysis. I called Esther and told her that there was a video circulating around of Senator Asshole that she should watch. I said that news of the video had already reached the news services and she should see what was being said. Finally, I told her that sooner or later there would be reporters who would want to talk to her since her date with the senator was so public. She was not happy about this news. By the time the evening news aired, television reporters were interviewing the senator's colleagues about many of the senator's comments on the video, and the senator really screwed up thanks to Wendy's ability to get Senator Asshole to brag about himself. I love women, especially married ones. I like to humiliate their husbands. I especially like women with huge breasts. Married women are easy prey. Usually, they are tired of boring sex with their husbands and are ready to do anything for a change. The husbands of married women don't want to say anything. They don't want their friends and family to know that the real man stole their wives. I once seduced the wife of a presidential candidate. Sometimes I take married women with me on trips to foreign countries under the guise of personal assistants or secretaries. They are always very grateful for the opportunity to spend nights with me. Taxpayers have no idea how much of their money I spend on semi-official holidays. The airfare alone is staggering for me and my harem. My campaign donors have no idea how much of their donations are for my personal use. And so on. These revelations complement the senator's video presentations. Within 2 weeks, the senator was forced to resign from the Senate. Unfortunately for him, this was just the beginning of his problems. Numerous official investigations into his finances were soon launched. Also, many civil suits were brought against the senator by private individuals, mostly husbands. The senator was condemned to the last man by all his Washington colleagues. His non-political friends deserted him. Even his extended family was so embarrassed and ashamed of him that they disowned him completely. Hester and I almost completely avoided any involvement in the senatorial scandal. The press had much more serious problems. There were so many divorces that we weren't considered important enough to even mention it in the newspapers or on television. Hester asked me if I was responsible for any of the senator's problems. I replied, maybe. Over the next few weeks, we will see the senator's career come to an ignominious end. He was eventually expelled from the Senate and stripped of his title. He returned to our home state, where he was highly respected for many years. However, his party and local associates quickly condemned him. Lawsuits quickly drained his bank account, and even his generous pension benefits as a senator were not enough to keep him solvent. He soon owed several $1 million in legal fees. His luxurious home was sold to help him pay off his debts. He was bombarded with serious threats. He apparently believed that he was being hunted because he soon disappeared completely. An investigative reporter eventually discovered that he was selling used cars in Central Florida. Apparently, his sonorous voice and gift of gab made him successful at work. However, he grew a beard and went by his middle name so that no one would recognize him. Hester and I resumed our informal separation and casual relationship. This became the norm for almost 2 years. The children seemed to adjust to our separation without any lasting or deep emotional trauma. I think the time and affection we devoted to the children separately was greater than if we had remained married. However, I eventually fell in love again, with Kate. Our relationship developed slowly until we realized that we wanted to be together forever. I had a wonderful relationship with her children, and my children loved her very much. We thought we could have a wonderful marriage, except for the fact that I was still married to Esther. For the first time, I thought about divorce, but I wasn't sure how it would affect the status quo that seemed to be working so well. As it turned out, Esther had been dating a man for more than a year. His name was Dan Matthews, and he was her school's math teacher and swimming waiter polo coach. Apparently, they started out as friends, but over time they developed a much deeper relationship. The gentleman, Esther's friend, was a widower with a young son. In addition to the fact that he fell in love with Esther, he admitted that he wanted a family and a mother for his child again. My children met him and thought he was a good person. I ended up meeting him too, and he really seemed like a regular guy and obviously really liked Hester. He understood perfectly well why Hester and I broke up, but he was more than sure that she would never do anything like that again. I was too. So Esther and I filed for divorce. It was very straightforward and undeniable. Hester ran the house and the children continued to lead their lives uninterrupted. I kept my townhouse and lakefront lot, where I eventually built a 4-bedroom cottage. The remaining assets were divided fairly. Kate and I had a small but magnificent wedding. About 25 friends attended the event. Of course, all my divorced ladies were there as bridesmaids, and Elsie was there as a bridesmaid. Since I didn't have many male friends, I assigned my son to be best man and Kate's boy to be ring bearer. Daughter Kate was our flower girl. Hester and Dan attended the wedding. 2 months later, they got married. I was happy to get married again. I was never cut out to be a middle-aged bachelor, even with all the privileges. I'm especially lucky to be married to Kate. She was a physically beautiful woman and a wonderful, loving companion and friend. Our only problem, if you can call it a problem, was how to balance our family life. Between my kids living with me and Kate, or living with Hester and Dan, we had to juggle a lot socially. Sometimes we all went on hikes together. Dan and I became really good friends. Kate and I would sometimes go on a double date with Dan and Esther. Despite the complicated relationship that had developed, everything was fine with us. All the children came together to form a happy, well-adjusted next generation. We all looked forward to years of holidays, birthdays, graduations, weddings, and grandchildren. What else is there? Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.